Hello, my name is Michela O'Connor Abrams, founder of Mocha Plus. Welcome to our Collective Conscience series. We created this series for you to bring together great minds from around the world on myriad topics that we hope will expand your mind, will challenge your current beliefs, and give you an opportunity to be inspired with every video. Enjoy.
Good evening and welcome to the 10th Collective Conscience Salon. This is actually our ninth on Zoom. When Michela and I created, I'm Shelley Tatum Kieran and a partner at Mocha Plus. And Michela and I created Collective Conscience because we wanted to just bring together people from all different backgrounds and industries and have a conversation every Monday night and just learn something a little bit new and maybe go into your week with a different feeling than you might have had on Monday morning. And now, without further ado, Michela.
Thank you, Shelley. So welcome, everybody. This is, as she said, our ninth, and it's really exciting to have had such an amazing group of people who, especially during this time, give us really important food for thought. And my idea, and Shelley and I talk about this, when you're finished here, it should be that we took your brain out and massaged it and put it back in so that you feel refreshed, you have new ideas and new inspiration. And there's no better guest to do that this week than Betsy Burroughs. Betsy, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. You and I have known each other longer than either of us care to admit, but a long time, and we started out when you were my client, all those many years ago in high tech, and became fast friends and walked through an industry in technology together that was a great deal of fun. They were the wild times. We'd passed the 3 martini lunchtime, but everybody was still drinking loads of Chardonnay and flying all over the place with Bill Gates and all of the other CEOs who at that point were pretty ordinary people. So when you then came to the place where you decided that it was going to be more exciting to do things about the neuroscience of behavior, and that's 15 plus years ago, I was excited about it so much that I became your subject quite often, all to my great pleasure and ways in which it helped me innumerably. In fact, then fast forward to 2014, and you write your book, Focus Catalysts, and I was honored to write the foreword for the book, which momentarily, because the dog started to eat it, my favorite part of this foreword is that there are no other innovation tools I could recommend more than these Focus Catalyst guided brainstorming techniques. And it is true that anytime that I was just really stuck on something and how to make it work, even though the kernel of the idea was there, I'd call you and say, need a process. So without further ado, Betsy, what I hope you will do is take us through the way in which you've approached this. And then, of course, as the invitation to the salon promises, we will get to do this with Michela, making it very transparent and even vulnerable, which is okay with me. So Betsy, take it away.
Great. Yeah, Michela called me. It was the mid 80s. We're both old. I'm a lot older than you. And I'd been in Silicon Valley. I'd first in San Francisco, then Silicon Valley, consumer packaged goods, big ad agencies, and then the biggest ones in Silicon Valley. And I had ended up going and having my own ad agency, and I had a client come to me, and what happened with them is, sorry. Had a big campaign to do for that client. And I woke up one morning and I had a fully formed campaign, really, really fast, all the details. took it to the client. We sat in his office and screamed for the longest time because we knew it was the right answer. And it got executed exactly as it had come to me. And it took that client from a 35 share of market to a 50% share of market, basically overnight. And I ended up joining the company as chief marketing officer and was there for 5 years. I had the lightning strike another time where a similar thing happened. And once that happened, I started to want to figure out what's going on in my brain and how can I make it happen more often. People think it's the muse and you can't control it, but I wanted to figure out a way to do it more at will. And the process that I'm going to take you through or give you a little taste of today is the result of that. And I do it with business clients. After I'd been doing it for a long time with business clients, though, once I decided to use it on some personal problems, and I found myself stopping one bad habit after another with the techniques in my first book, and including this one that we're going to talk about today. And I changed one bad habit, stopped one bad habit after another, all the way up to and including losing 90 pounds easily and easily keeping it off. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to give you just a little overview. We're going to have a bunch of time for Q&A. Michela and I are going to be able to give you a bit of a demonstration, a live demonstration, and we'll take it from there. So we have some slides that could you guys hear me? Was I all on mute?
No, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Okay. We'll worry about the rest of the intro since apparently I was on mute. I did not know that.
No, so we got most of your intro. It was just
Okay.
when the slides turned on.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. That scared me. Okay, so first slide. I'm going to explain these in a little bit more detail, but there are only 3 things you need to remember. One is threat response in the brain triggers cortisol. Cortisol makes you stupid, and dopamine makes you smart. We're going to go one by one through those. Next slide. Okay, no, threat response, the next slide. No, the other direction. Other direction, back, there. Threat response equals cortisol. So cortisol is a bad feeling, threat response brain chemical. And whenever we sense a threat, our brain resenses a threat, whether it's real or imagined, it will cause you to have a big hit of cortisol, otherwise known as the freak out mode. And its job is to do a couple of things. One is it's to activate fight or flight. It's meant for, you're out on the savannah and you're a gazelle and you smell a lion and you get a hit of cortisol and you take off. The other thing that cortisol does is it makes you hyper vigilant to threats. And we have a lot bigger brain than a gazelle. So with that big brain, what we do is we can imagine all kinds of threats. So once you get a hit of cortisol, your brain will look for more threats. It'll imagine more threats, and you can kind of really spiral down. One of the things that happens, though, chemically and physically in your body is the next slide. Cortisol makes you stupid. What that means is when you get a hit of cortisol, what your body does is it drains oxygen out of your rational brain, your prefrontal cortex, and puts and uses it for your arms and legs, sends it to your arms and legs so you're ready to fight and flight. But the problem is that your rational brain, your prefrontal cortex running low on oxygen can't think rationally and come up with solutions effectively. on lower oxygen. So if you're freaking out, you're likely not being able to problem solve very well because you don't have as much oxygen in your brain as you need. Next slide. Dopamine makes you smart. So dopamine is actually a brain chemical that seeks reward. And when you're running on dopamine, you actually feel good. And what that means is you're not running on cortisol. You're not getting oxygen drained from your prefrontal cortex. And so you're able to think much more clearly, exponentially more clearly. And so dopamine, in a way, makes you smarter. Next slide. So what that means is if you want to really solve problems, you first need to, next, switch from cortisol to dopamine fast. Now, there's a number of ways you can do that kind of switch. There's a lot of talk about meditation, exercise, things like that. And I know that definitely works for a lot of people. I come from having a very, what I call a scaredy cat brain. I can be very sensitive to threat, and I can imagine them and make them up in my head. So I needed something that was, that would work fast, that wouldn't require me to quiet my mind or even get out of the house and start walking. So the next slide. For me, the key is easy, effortless, and fun. Actually, it sounds pretty obvious, but a lot of times you don't think about that. The easier something is, the more likely you're to do it. So that if you do start with really easy things, you can motivate yourself. If you start with things that are really difficult, your brain will fight you and stop you from actually doing it. And so I devised this process so that I could just easily do it. I didn't have to calm my mind. I didn't have to get into a certain mental state. I would just start doing the process, and the process itself would get me to switch from cortisol to dopamine. And that goes into this technique and that we're about to show you, Michela and I. And the next slide talks about that. Key to it is I get clients to randomly match a problem, preferably something that's really, really bugging them, but a problem that they have with something that's a favorite. So a problem is cortisol inducing, and thinking about a favorite is actually dopamine inducing. When you think about your problem combined with something that's a favorite of yours together at the same time, that creates, next slide, and opens up new neural pathways in your brain that switch dopamine for cortisol. So one of the things about neural pathways and things that we've been doing all our lives, actually the neural pathways that you have, bad habits, good habits, whatever they are, they never go away, but you can create new neural pathways on top of them. That's what habits are. And so the technique that I use to do that is a technique that Michela and I are now going to go through. Next slide. Abbreviated demo. So when I actually work with clients, it's more than this and longer than this, but this will give you a taste. This is just sort of like a little experiment, and you can get a sense of what it's about. I do take, I have people give me at least 3 problems and 3 favorites, and then I randomly match them, connect them together. I won't even do it myself. There's actually a fabulous website called random.org, and it'll generate any random number, set of random numbers that you want. So I use that. So that's the basis of what we're going into. And now what we're going to do is just give you a little demonstration so you can kind of get a feel for what's going on here. And then we'll do Q&A after that, and you can ask me questions on any of this that I've talked about. So the next page. So Michela she had a problem, and she says, I want to move in 2024, but I have no idea where to move to. And that was the problem. She was wanting to have new insights and new neural pathways thinking about it. And that one was randomly matched with a favorite of hers. Next slide, my music room. So on the next slide, Michela is going to join me. Although first I'm going to just, I want to read that next slide. So what I do with clients is we'll randomly match their problem with a favorite, and then I'll ask them to tell me the reasons why that thing is a favorite. So that's what most of the copy on that page is the reasons why she sees her music room as a favorite. And what I always do is I read it out loud to the client and just tell them to sit back, relax, and just notice anything that kind of comes up and let it kind of sink into your brain. So I'm asking you to pretend that you're Michela and play along with us. So her reasons for why she loves her music room are these. It's otherwise known as a living room. I walk by it every morning and night and many times a day. Sometimes something I always envisioned was a grand piano there. Then a good friend asked us, can you take our green piano, like for free? And it's now, and as she said, it's now sitting exactly where I'd envisioned it 25 years ago. It's where I broadcast the Collective Conscious Salon. So when her picture comes up, you'll see the baby grand in the background. The room has my grandparents' 140-year-old music box, which, by the way, that is not some little box you hold in your hand. It's a big piece of furniture. It's very impressive. There's history, friendship, and elegance in this room. It's great that it's juxtaposed with the very modern pieces in the kitchen, which are right next to it. It's a traditional room with a modern rug. I love that room. It reinforces how much I love working with my clients. So now I'm going to have Michela come on the screen again, and we can talk through this. Either that or you just go, maybe you just come on, Michela, with on audio.
I'm here, Betsy.
Okay. So again, this is the music room combined with figuring out where you want to move to. So first of all, and this is the first time she's seen these two paired. This is new for her. And I'll just, what we do is she'll talk about some things that she saw that were kind of connections and different ways to think about it. I'll jump in and do that as well. It helps to have somebody who's not so close to it with you also brainstorming, and that's a lot of what I do with clients. So we'll start by Michela. Is there anything that jumped out at you in particular about how the music related to where you might want to live?
Yeah, I mean, the whole, it being a traditional room and many of these pieces that came from my grandparents' restaurant in San Francisco in the 20s and 30s, plus the modern piece, I guess it just, it's going to have to be someplace reasonably cosmopolitan, so maybe off the grid, but close to cosmopolitan, because I couldn't live without being able to go to the symphony or the opera or the ballet when I wanted to, but still really able to get away. And,
Yep.
You know, I can do that here. I can walk up the mountain for 5 miles a day, which Kuda and I do in the morning. And so it's going to have that. And the other thing that struck me probably was the history of friendship and elegance in the room. And while I really love simplicity and just a place that's uncluttered, and I don't like tchotchkes and giant curtains, and I really feel a whole lot freer in more open places. There's a warmth to the pieces. And so it made me think that the history and the friendship made me think, well, it has to be someplace where I already have friends who live. It's not going to be able to be North Dakota, South Dakota, Ohio. Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting as far as it's juxtaposed to the kitchen. To me, that was speaking to, I happen to know you're a fabulous cook, and cooking and in an area that has like amazing food or farmers market or things like that.
True. Yeah, that would have to be the case for certain.
One thing you might want to take a look at is think about yourself back 25 years ago from now, not 25 years ago from when you created the room, but even from now, and like when you were, where you were and what you were interested in back then, because there may be some cues to that.
Could be, but then I can answer that quickly, because then that would have been New York for sure. And I'm not so sure the answer today.
Well, there might be qualities of New York that you're looking for.
Like
Doesn't have to mean, therefore, you must move to New York.
The Met, the Guggenheim, yeah, just a few things that I still love going back to, but I don't think living there would be my favorite.
Where are your networks?
Actually,
Where are your networks
right now? Just stick with us right now, and we can get into it later. By the way, just so I also meant to preface this by saying all of this that's we're talking about now is just starting to, I like to say, seed your brain to work in background. So sometimes people get big ha-has in the middle of doing this initial process, but much more often what happens is I have people look at these, a list like this, preferably every day for a week or two. I'll have them put the list up on their bathroom mirror. Sometimes there's pictures. A lot of times I'll ask people for favorite places they've traveled to, and I'll tell them to put the pictures of that around their house. What you do that is over time, the brain keeps seeing that in your environment, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you just get this big aha at that moment, but it starts to work and starts connecting new neural pathways in your brain. And then when you're relaxed, say in the shower or on a walk or a drive, all of a sudden out of the blue, you get this big aha and you realize that that's the answer that you're looking for. So all we're doing now is just the initial steps talking about that.
Okay.
Anything else on this one you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I think that, I mean, the one thing it occurred to me in going back over it, but what I usually do, as you know, since we've done this so many times, I do print this out, because days from now, something else will occur to me that I hadn't thought of, or something else, or somebody will call me from a place and I'll say, wait a minute, I never thought of, yeah. So not at this moment,
the other
but
thing
it
that
might
I
be.
tell people, what often happens is they will see a headline on a website in passing. They will see, they'll notice either a conversation or something in someone else's home or something that somebody brings up that they would not have noticed if their brain hadn't been primed like this. The brain works, it works on the exact principle that we've all experienced, which is if you see a new car, you start to see it everywhere. If you hear a new word, you start to hear it everywhere. All that is it means that your brain filters out the vast majority of data, like 99.99% of data that's actually coming into your brain at any given time. And we see what we've filtered, we see what we're looking for. When something new comes into our field of vision or our thinking, which is what this can generate new ways to think about that, then just a casual comment from a friend or something that you see in an email or something that you read about in an article, all of a sudden you look at it and you see it and you see how it relates to the answer that you're looking for about where to live in this particular case. So let's go from this one and let's play with the next one, and then we'll do some Q&A. So the second one was, I have so much I don't need in this house, but I have a hard time simplifying. I think a common problem for many people. And that was randomly matched with a favorite of yours, which was a painting of Montmartre in the hallway. And let me just read in the next slide what the reasons why that was a favorite for yours. The painting reminds me of Alan immediately. He brought it from France in 1973, long before I met him. I love the medium, oil and ink. I really feel like I've been there, and I have, once in 1990 with Alan. It sits diagonally from where I work. I look over at that painting when I'm working. It makes me feel grounded. It reminds me of a time when I felt really blissful and fulfilled and loved. Everything good feeling. So randomly matching with simplifying in your home. What comes up to you?
That obviously all I need to take with me is the painting.
Now that's simple.
That goes way beyond Marie Kondo and just keep what you love.
Oh yeah.
No, I think that, but it really does speak to, I love the art that we collected for 30 years, and art that my parents had that is now here. There is still too much unless I move to the same size house I'm in, which the whole idea is downsizing and not doing that. But it really, I mean, immediately it just hits me that if you're focused on it, it is not that hard to know what the items are that are really meaningful that you don't want to live without, and be able then to go through other things, almost like primary, secondary, tertiary, like what's so important, and then what's important but could live without, and then what's really not that important after all. And I just think it's so overwhelming because there are so many collections of sculpture and things that and some of other collectibles that Alan did. Yeah, so it's kind of tough to figure that out. But this made me immediately think, well, wait a second. It might not be as hard as I think. It just feels that way because I haven't approached it yet. And other friends have offered, well, let's just come over and go to the wine cellar and open a bunch of wine, and then we'll just go keep that, not that. And I don't know, that's a possibility too.
Well, one of the things is I can look at this list and I can see a lot of things that seem like obvious, you know, stuff that makes you feel grounded, blissful, fulfilled, loved, you know, a lot of things like that. But I find that when it is kind of gotten to from this kind of a process, your brain is much more open to using those things than you would have maybe otherwise. You might have tried to Marie Kondo it, or like you said, drink wine from the wine cellar and have friends helping you toss things. And but this gets it hits you at one of the deals about it is when you're matching a favorite with a problem, the favorite like becomes a metaphor for what you're doing. And the brain works on metaphors and responds to that so much more powerfully. Again, you go and you put this, you know, in your bathroom and you think about this, it can allow you to just really organically and feel grounded and peaceful about what you're doing with what things.
Right.
You know, it gives you that security that you're doing something you really know is the right thing to do, whether it's throwing something away or keeping it, or giving it away rather than keeping it. And it'll make the experience of going through those things much more satisfying and fulfilling than just continually beating yourself up. Oh God, I got to get rid of this stuff. And you get focused on that, which only causes you more and more cortisol.
Right.
By pairing it with favorites, you're taking a problem and pairing it with dopamine. and allowing it to unfold in a rewarding way. Because as I said, dopamine is really an interesting thing about dopamine is I've had it explained that the brain, going back 10,000 years, like when you were like 70% to a goal, it would give you a hit of dopamine, so you'd keep going. So especially things like finding food and water was so difficult. Humans needed something that would kind of get them going that last 30%. And I find I actually have systems myself where I generate dopamine hits points throughout my day to keep me going all through my day. If you understand how dopamine works, you can really make it work for you and do a lot of really neat things and accomplish things that you didn't before think you could do.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I think that's enough of just an introduction for people.
Yep.
And I wanted to open it up to Q&A right now. Anybody who has any questions about this, I know it's a lot and different, and this is a very brief overview, but feel free to ask questions and hopefully clarify some things for anyone.
Well, Betsy, also let me just add something. In the as you've continued to study this, in fact, the Atlantic actually called you the Silicon Valley entrepreneur turned neuroscience researcher. And I think that what's so interesting is it has come into the press and the media and into literature in a way that it hadn't 10 years ago, even.
As far as neuroscience, yeah.
Correct.
You kind of say neuroscience and it's a big light to everybody.
Exactly. So as we sit here in this, literally sit here in this time of isolation during the virus, I think that everybody experiences some sense of feeling something that they would rather not be feeling and feel stuck and can't get out of it. Not just, gee, I can't get out of the house, or I don't want to wear a mask, or, you know, something minor, all the way to I'm truly scared to death. And how do I change that? So I think it can't be overstated that the simplicity of being able to just understand your own brain and what the triggers are and the ways in which you can stop yourself once you understand just this piece of the simple fact of the cortisol, dopamine, and the process, I think really is useful for everybody. It is, no matter the situation. It doesn't have to be as cataclysmic. I think I want to move, I want to sell my house and move to a different city. It can be much more simple than that. And I mean, when you turned it on yourself and decided, wait a minute, you know, for umpteen number of years, I've tried every other way to get to the quote unquote weight I want. So what about this? And all of a sudden, you know, magically, but using your brain, you lost the 90 pounds. So I
understood how to do that, though. It's a radically different way than anybody else has done it, but and I'm happy to talk to anybody about that separately. But
right. So if anybody has questions now, the way to do it is either to ask a question through chat, and Shelley can read it, or we'll unmute you, and please feel free to ask Betsy the questions.
I have a question, Betsy. So how do you coach or help people to maintain this mindset, this frame of mind, to exercise it after they've gone through this process with you, both in the workplace and maybe in their personal life?
Well, it is, you know, it's like anything, it's a learning process, and that takes time. And as people work with that, like I said, this particular process is the hardest one to just sort of describe to people. And this is the first time I've done a demo like this, and publicly. But there's my book. Actually, my book is designed for dopamine hits. I purposely I want to write a series of small books, because when you finish a small book, you feel really good. You get a dopamine hit. It has short chapters. Every time you finish the chapter, you get a dopamine hit. You feel good. Your brain feels like, oh, we're getting somewhere. And there's other techniques in there that are really easy. One of them is called Burn Baby Burn, and I have actually the entire process in my blog on my website, and it's easy and fun to read it, and anybody can do that. People pick up on what Burn Baby Burn is really fast. That one, I mean, I've used it several times this week. I use all these techniques all the time when I'm freaking out.
Relationship you used it for, Betsy.
What?
I can remember a particular relationship you used that for.
I'm trying to figure out which one, but
Oh,
don't
do
get me in
tell,
trouble.
ladies.
Now we're going down the Tinder route.
Definitely. We have another question. Drew
Yes.
from Placer County is asking, the process of switching from cortisol to dopamine has made me more mindful over the last few years. Betsy, what are your thoughts?
More mindful? Yeah, definitely. I think anything understanding the way your brain works makes you more mindful. And a lot of it goes against conventional wisdom. For example, I've come to realize that conventional wisdom for weight loss certainly doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for a lot of people. And it doesn't have to do with motivation, willpower, or trying to be good. And that's a whole nother conversation. But when you understand the way the brain works, then you can work with your brain so much better. Speaking of which, I'm about to start to do a weekly column on a business online magazine called Biznology. And the column is going to be on the neuroscience of work. And it will be like an anthology column where I'll have, I'll reference and do a little abstract about different articles, podcasts, and things like that. There's amazing resources out there for learning more about the way the brain works.
Okay, we have another question from the mom. How about the first thought upon waking? Do you set a question to thought at bedtime and get an answer in the morning?
I think that works fabulous. As a matter of fact, the way I like to do the Focus Catalyst process is actually in 2 parts, like 2 half hours with clients, because at the end of the first half hour, they get the random matches. And I want them to sleep on it at least one night and more if possible, because the brain will just start working in background and start to connect all those things out. So then when we work to really brainstorm together about it, people's brains are more primed.
Okay, and from Anna, sometimes stressful moments happen on the fly, i.e. a colleague says something that triggers a strong negative response. Is there an application of this that lets you create the dopamine hit in the moment?
Yeah, that's what I use Burn Baby Burn for. Like I said, Burn Baby Burn, I find easier to explain to people. Basically what you do is you take whatever's really bothering you and you make a list about all the things that are bothering you about it. But it absolutely requires that you write every item on the list in the most catastrophically negative terms possible. I can't tell you how satisfying that is. It's like, we're all gonna die, this is awful, I hate this, everything's gonna crash and burn. You can just say that, and it's better. The more negative, the more catastrophic you are about it. Because I find telling yourself not to do that only backfires. So this, you can kind of write it all out. You write out a list. It can be as long as short as you want. I mean, I might just have 4 things or something why I'm really upset at this person, and that's really awful, and all of that. The reason why it's really important that you list it in really catastrophically negative terms is next you take another sheet of paper and you write the exact opposite word for word of what you wrote in the first list. So the second list is ridiculously positive. You do not have to believe one word in the positive side. It's a short chapter from my first book is on the blog about Burn Baby Burn. It's called the blog is called Burn Baby Burn. It has a flames picture on it. It's easy to find. And I tell the story and I give an exact Burn Baby Burn. When I first went into business for myself with my own ad agency, I had a very big client in Silicon Valley. And yet soon after I started working with them, they started to do like a reorg every other week, it seemed. And my client was always saying to me, bill me as much as you can because they're going to be a reorg and they're just going to use somebody different, not because you're not doing a great job, but just because it's a reorg. And it was so scary. And my son was in high school. I hadn't saved any money for his college or anything like that. And I'd taken this risk to decide to go into business for myself. And I started doing Burn Baby Burn. By the way, Burn Baby Burn is incredibly satisfying if you actually burn the first list, if you can do it safely. And I started making these lists and I was like writing one a day, and I had a treadmill and I would like every morning just go through and just read the opposites. I did not believe a word, absolutely not a word. Anyway, a couple of years went by. I never lost the client. I actually fired them because I got a bigger client that was a competitor. And then there's at the end of the chapter, it's like how Burn Baby Burn got me $1 million. So that's the tease. So take a look at that because it works great. And you can do that in the middle of something really freaking you out. And what's amazing and what I find and what my clients find is you write the opposite and you're not believing it. You don't have to believe it. There's no mental gymnastics to make yourself to believe it. You just write the opposite, even if it doesn't really kind of make sense when you write the opposite. But you start to write the opposite and your brain will sort of go, huh, that's kind of true. Or there's something about that that's kind of true. And before you know it, your brain can start going down that other neural pathway. If you just try to stop yourself with all the negative stuff, your brain is just going to go fight you and just tell you it's really, really bad. And you'll just get stuck in that swirl.
We have a question from Anne Flanagan. Hello, Anne Flanagan. So good to hear you, Betsy. And I remember many moons ago when you started working in this arena, in your experience with clients and friends, how has this method impacted their longer-term ability to stay focused and manage time effectively? And what is the most unexpected outcome that you've witnessed? Thank you, Anne.
Unexpected outcome. Well, one thing, as far as this process that I just did with Michela, like I've done it for clients and I'm not even planning to do specific branding solutions for them. And but spontaneously out of it, I come up with a really great tagline for them that then they end up using for years and really helps them to explain, say, a complex technical product really succinctly in like 4 words of a tagline. And so that's one that stands out to me. And I find that people, they discover their own solutions. I'll tell you, one of my favorite parts of doing a focus catalyst process, which is what we did today, was I do those random matches. And like I said, I use random.org. So I don't know which problem is going to go with which favorite. And whenever I do that, I just feel like it's Christmas, because you just start to see something just completely open up, that you can start to see the solutions. You can see the client just light up and go from being just feeling awful and down about the problems, and suddenly they're seeing this solution and this solution and this solution. It's Christmas.
And for with Burn Baby Burn, do you have any neuro advantage to handwriting, or are you using the computer?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I started using it on using 3x5 cards. My friends from back in the olden days, I was just calling it cards. It sounded like tarot cards or something. And that was a neat thing. And you're not limited to 3 things, or 3 favorites and 3 problems. I came up with the 3 favorites and the 3 problems because when I was asked in 2013 to do a TEDx for 350 people, I wanted to actually have them physically go through the process and write on cards, and I got them to do it. So you can go TEDx Betsy Burroughs and you will find it. It is also my before picture, me at 250 pounds. And I take people through the technique and show them the cards. I don't do the brainstorming part. It's just the introduction. So if you kind of want to, you can look at the TEDx talk and see how that works. Sorry, I lost track of what the question was again.
The question was, do you see any neuro advantage to handwritten?
Oh yeah, handwritten. So one thing I did in the early days is I would literally take my to-do list that I felt really overwhelmed, and I'd put one item on my to-do list on the front of the cards, and I might have a stack of 20 cards, maybe even more. And I would turn them over and shuffle them and then write things that I noticed that were favorites. And sometimes it would just be things I saw in the room that I liked, a certain color or vase or picture or whatever. And one thing that I really like to do with focus catalyst process, with the focus catalyst process, I say take them for a walk. When you're walking, you can access different parts of your brain that you can't if you're just sitting there. And so I would literally go and have a stack of these cards, and I would have, I'd literally look at the things around me that I was walking by, the tree or that particular car or whatever it was. And then every time I write about what a favorite is, I write at least 2 words or phrases on why I like it. And I would just have this stack, and then I kind of walk along and I kind of look at a front and back of a card. What typically would happen is I look at a front and back of a card and I think to myself, I got nothing, nothing jumps out at me. And then I would walk 10 more steps and it would be like, boom, this thing would come to me. So I like to do that. A lot of people know me because what I would do, and I would still do, can't do it right now, is I would take clients on all-day strategy sessions from San Francisco to Yosemite and back on Amtrak in one day. And I would do a different one of my techniques on each leg of the trip. And we get 3 hours in Yosemite Valley and hike up to the falls and all of that. It's great. So going outside really helps. I do a lot of it now on my computer too. So either way works.
Okay.
And what about the site? Oh, sorry, Michela.
I think this is the last question then, Shelley.
The site was random.org. Is that the site you referenced?
For the random, it's random.org. My site is focuscatalyst.com.
Great. Betsy, thank you so, so much. It goes without saying that over the years through, wow, how many things personally and professionally that we've done on those walks with those cards, lots of things, and it's been wonderful. So thank you for spending the evening with us.
Happy
And
to.
thank you. So I want to thank everybody. Next Monday is Memorial Day, and our guest speaker is Joyce Sterling, the CEO of Iron Horse Vineyards. For those of you who,
Oh, cool.
it'll be
Sorry.
great. For those of you who do not drink, I encourage you to join us anyway, because as we do with each speaker, I not only explore the relationship that I have had and been honored to have with my guest speaker, but it's also about their story. And so we're going to talk about this family-owned vineyard, a woman who is been voted the most influential, non-political, but democratic contributor and shepherd of the environment, and how she got there, and her unbelievable parents in their 90s who are still very active, and she carries on their legacy. We will actually be tasting a brand new release of what's called the Rainbow Cuvée. And if anybody wants to have a bottle of that, because you do want to do the short tasting with Joy as part of the story, then I will make sure to get that to you. So you only have to send me an email at Michela@mochaplussf.com, and I'll make sure you get that to be part of the tasting. This was just released. They have never before had this Rainbow Cuvée, and there's something about, again, the times in which we're living and somewhere over the rainbow and the positivity that we all keep in mind and hold close right now. So thank you ever so much for being a part of it tonight, and I look forward to seeing you next Monday.